Right, welcome everybody. Okay. So my talk is same but different, which is an expression that is quite often used in Thailand, and soon you're going to find out why. For those people who do not know me, I've spent some time at Lego in Denmark. I then worked for Philips Research in the Netherlands. Worked for the Eindhoven University of Technology. Spent some time at ATR in Japan. And now I'm at the HIT Lab here at the University of Canterbury. And before I get started, I just want to show you two small video clips because they're relevant to all the talks we've seen before, and it's been raised a couple of times, and you saw me raising my hand telling you, well, we've done that. So here you go. Here is the task that we had of where we gave people an interaction with a small robot, and afterwards we asked them, okay, here got a hammer, now smash it. And this is what happened.
And then you have to put it so it doesn't leak anymore. Okay,
now it's gone. Thank you.
This is inhumane.
Did you hear that? She said, this is inhumane. And here we got this tragedy of, I just want to do as much as necessary, but not more than that, and they felt really bad. This is the mercy kill.
Maar doen we maar snel, want hij kan het.
Well, so essentially we tested this and we tested hesitation, but of course this is quite, let's say, resource intensive because you have to buy a lot of robots. So we came up with this variation. And in this video, well, I guess you'll see it very quickly.
You can now switch the iPad off. Thank you.
I will switch
Yes,
off.
because switch me off.
Yes.
You are not really going to switch me off.
Yes, I
Are
will.
you?
You made a stupid choice. Yes.
You can decide to keep me switched on. I will be completely silent. Could
Okay.
that be an idea?
Yeah. No, I will switch you off. I will switch you off.
Please.
No, please. This will happen now. One.
Then I will be silent now. Is that all right?
Yes.
Please, you can still change your mind.
No. There you go.
So again, we measured hesitation time, like how long do people hesitate to turn the knob and what kind of knob behavior do they do. Again, this is like by now a decade old, but still. So we try out stuff. I mean, this is what we do. Sometimes we got some philosophical ideas and then we actually try them out and see, what actually happens when you confront people with it. But that's not the talk that I'm really after today. Same but different. So here we got the robot building in Bangkok in Thailand, which is a host of the Bank of Asia. Now, why would a bank ask an architect to create a headquarters for them which looks like a robot? It is quite peculiar. And here comes the idea, like we associate things with robots, like the future and automation, and this is all great. And the managers of the bank bought into this, and they said, okay, we're going to design a whole building like this. Quite impressive, quite a statement. And of course, a lot of these people, bankers, probably never interacted with a robot. What they've probably seen is something like this. They've seen lots and lots of robots in science fiction and TV shows, and this is what most people get their knowledge of about robotics. So this is a nice little poster, Find Wall-E. If you do, let me know. I've so far failed to find him. But nevertheless, so this is a problem that we have in our experiments. A lot of people come to our experiments and they have these ideas in their head about robots and what they are and what they not are, and they're usually just a reflection of what they've seen on TV. So we recently published a book called HumanRob Interaction Introduction, and for this book we kind of try to summarize everything and draw some conclusions and create a textbook that students can use for courses. And we put a lot of effort into creating a nice book. So we include a lot of photographs and images of robots. It was a complete nightmare in terms of acquiring all the copyrights, but in the end I think it kind of worked out well. And we even created a timeline like this that kind of like shows you where all of this starts. And I'll try to, no, that doesn't work. So here's the timeline, you can go and have a look at it. And it's supposed to work. So you can then essentially go through all these different robots and see when they arrived and when they disappeared. And the crazy thing is that when we looked and compiled all these images and all these robots, one thing occurred to us, and that is they're all dead, they're all gone. And that's scary because, the question really comes, if we keep on trying for decades to build social robots and we try to bring them to the market and nobody ever buys it, are we doing something wrong? What's going on? Why does nobody ever succeeds with doing this? And the only exceptions are a couple of research platforms, but then the target market is not the general public. It is just researchers, and they use it and they program it and they use it for their experiments, but for consumers, not much is happening. So I figured let's have a look at an example. This is the Jibo robot. Who's aware of the Jibo robot? Who backed up the Jibo robot on Indiegogo? Nobody? Okay. So it's a cute little robot, and it started off as a campaign. They raised over $3 million in this Indiegogo campaign to develop this robot. And it was backed, essentially, it was initiated by Cynthia Brazell from the MIT Media Lab. Well, it doesn't get much better than this, does it? And on top of this $3 million, also venture capitalists jumped onto it, threw another $60 million at it. So they had really talented people. They had some of the best researchers in the world. And they even managed to produce a robot. I mean, a lot of projects actually fail and they never deliver anything. You never get anything. So here we have Cynthia introducing the robot. I hope. No, I'm not having much luck with my videos today. Sorry. Play.
Jibo, please introduce yourself.
Sure. Hi, my name is Jibo. I'm the world's first family robot.
Yeah, so I mean, this is actually we've developed several prototypes on the road to where we are right now. And certainly, we've done testing all along the way. We very quickly found, and this is just reinforces a lot of what I found as my work at MIT. People want to treat Jibo like a someone, not a something, and they often, at the end of the interaction, would say, we'd ask them explicitly, what's the difference between Jibo and a tablet computer? And they owned and had tablet computers, and they said, well, Jibo fits in like family. Jibo's part of the family. Jibo's warm, Jibo's friendly. Jibo's knows me and responds to me. So people were really resonating with the fact that it's a social robot.
Slow down.
So you said a couple of arguments here, which are quite valid. What's the difference between Jibo and a tablet? Right? That's a very, very fundamental question. And the answer is, it fits into the family. That was the pitch. Right? Well, maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. Well, anyway, they made it on the cover of the Time magazine. So again, how much better does it get? Your product as an invention, best invention of 2017 on the Time magazine cover, it doesn't get much better than this. What then happened is that they actually delivered it, right? They brought the product out to the customers and people reviewed it. And this is what they found. I hope. Oh dear. Play. So I'm really unlucky with my videos today.
In July 2014, man did not yet know the dangers of backing just any random Kickstarter or Indiegogo campaign. And swimming in childlike naivety and blind optimism, over 2,500 people backed Jibo, a social robot companion that the creators, Jibo Inc., promised would do everything from making video calls to reading bedtime stories. And this was long before the Google Assistant or Amazon Echo existed. Now, for my part, it was pretty obvious that Jibo was too ambitious to be anything but an enormous belly flop onto a bed of hot coals. But coming off of the success of my then recent flaying of the Brunton hydrogen reactor, I was looking for a way to up the ante. I was looking for something even dumber to roast. So I bought one. 3.5 years later, my very own Jibo finally showed up. Was it worth the wait? Was it worth $900 US? Of course not. Don't be a Jibo. This video was brought to you.
So, in essence, it didn't go down very well. And again, they sold them. That was really good. But then the whole thing went into bankruptcy. And it just stopped. It was just not viable. And you might think, okay, well, here we go. Another one, bites the dust, and good luck for the next one. And yes, here we go. And this is where it gets interesting with same but different. They did everything right, it failed. And then a company such as NTT Disruption comes in and says like, yeah, but when we do it, it's going to be different. So they bought up Jibo, the company, whatever was left of it, and said like, okay, now we're going to do it, right? But nothing really has changed. I mean, it's still the same product. Yes, they make some slight modifications, maybe add Bluetooth. They will tweak it a little bit. But fundamentally, it's the same thing. So why would you even try again, right? So, and the answer to this is we have to understand NTT is the classical historical telecommunications company in Japan, NTT. And they created a new company, NTT Disruption, right? And to understand what NTT Disruption is about, I'd have to show you a video which is their manifesto. And I know it's not easy, and it always takes me a bit of time to get over with it, but here is their actually manifesto, if it works. It never works.
Limits. What a word. To you, there's no till where, no till here. Impossible. Unthinkable, crazy thing. All those words you deal with every day. They don't annoy you, they inspire you. They don't shut you in, they set you free. Listen, you need limits to be who you are. To disrupt, to create, to invent. You, the old rules breaker. You, the new rules ruler. You don't live in the real world, some may say. They just ignore this world of theirs is changing. And thanks to people like you, like us, like her, change is happening for good. We, the people who see things differently, those who say no to no. You are just a few, some may say. Yes, we are. But those few will create today what really matters for tomorrow.
Yeah. I mean, you have to understand, this is all stock video material. And this is material you just copy and paste, you just buy the licenses, just hack it together, and they paid a PI agency to do this. 1 or 2 clips in there from their actual work, but everything else is just propaganda. Yeah, and such organizations, buy Jibo. And then the question, of course, is why? And I did put a little bit of, I do run a podcast series called HumanRob Interaction, in which I go into much more detail, and I even interview NTT. So if you're interested, have a listen to that. But essentially the argument is like, okay, yeah, we're going to use it now, we're going to put it into a specific use case. We're going to use it for healthcare and education, you know, and it's going to be business to business. It's going to be all different. But it is not. I mean, that's what Jibo was already attempting to do. So nothing really changed. So why would they still bother? And I guess the answer we have to see is another one. Here's SoftBank Robotics Pepper robot. So SoftBank is again another big entity, a telecommunications company in Japan, and they bought up Aldebaran Robotics, and then, you know, sometime later they brought out this new robot, and suddenly all the shops in Japan, all the SoftBank shops who are selling mobile phones, were equipped with this robot. And they could afford it, and fundamentally this is a marketing exercise, right? And this is the same thing for NTT with Jibo. It's just they want to appear like sexy. We are the company of the future. We're doing all these things. We're disrupting everything, right? And that is the main drive. And you see here on Pepper, it has a touch display on its chest. And the reason for that is that it doesn't work. If you got this robot in a shop, the noise level in the shop is so loud that speech recognition doesn't work, right? And even it has speakers as its ears. Speakers as the ears, okay, let's go with that. It's still, people now might not necessarily be able to properly hear him when it talks. So therefore, a lot of interaction happens with the tablet. And we're coming back to the questions like, what's the point here? Why not just have a tablet, right? So, but they all go, you know, same, but different. You know, it's the same thing, but we're doing it different. And when we do it, it's going to be different, right? And so we have the Christchurch Airport, who bought 3 of those Pepper robots. And when they do it, it's going to be different, right? Because they're different. And they bought 3 of them. And, well, a lot of people were flying into Christchurch Airport, right? Have you seen this up on the 2nd floor, this innovation hub lounge thing? Yeah? No? Yeah? Have you seen the Pepper robots there? What did they do? You didn't care? Maybe that's the problem. To my knowledge, they do absolutely nothing. Because it's hard. It's really hard to make them work. It would be so logical, you would walk up to this robot and say, hey, can you please take me to gate 12? And then the robot would say, like, yeah, sure, follow me, I'll take you to gate 12, yeah? Very straightforward use case. But getting that to work is really, really hard. And Pepper is not the type of robot that could do this. Now, the airport learned this lesson by buying 3 of them and figuring out they're useless, at least for their usage case. And, you know, it's quite an expensive way of learning. You could talk to an expert if you wanted to. That might give you some shortcuts. Anyway, same, but different. The only company that I think sort of got it right is Sony with their Aibo dog. Because here you've got a robot that sort of doesn't pretend to be more than it is. Like similar to a dog, you know, you can say, do this, do that, and sometimes it listens, and most of the time it doesn't. Well, speech recognition as it is, though, that's how it works, you know? And so you can easily camouflage the fact that speech recognition doesn't work by, you know, just giving it the shape of a dog. And that kind of works. So you set the expectation level much lower, which I think is really, really helpful. And again, Sony also went through the same cycle. Like they had this Aibo in the 90s, and it was a great success. And when Aibo ended, everybody was like, oh my God, this is an end of an era, you know, oh, what's happening? And everybody was sad that Aibo was gone. When Jibo was gone, everybody was just laughing, you know, it was a lot of jokes were made about it. And now Sony's back, you know. 10 years later, they decide, oh, let's just do that again. Same, but different. You know, it's the same slightly improved robot. Unfortunately, they have not opened it up to that you can program it yourself a lot. You know, it's still locked in. The original robot was great because it was open and you can program it and you could do things with it. They're not quite there yet. Another example of a robot that is purely social, it has no function, it doesn't do anything, is Paro. So this is a seal robot. And the only thing it does, it is purrs. It purrs and it can wiggle its head. But it works. And the niche that they found is elderly care. Because people with dementia and reduced abilities, for them this is comforting. And it has been shown and proven that it worked, right? But this is where at the level where robotics works, and you can sell it, and they've been selling this for some years now, you can't go to a shop and buy it. It's still really expensive, and there's just no shop that you could go anywhere and just pick it up from the shelf. So it's a bit more complicated. So the question really starts to arise: can a robot that is predominantly or maybe only social or a communication partner be successful at all? And maybe the answer is no. Maybe the only thing that will ever work is something that has a function, that actually does something. Because there's a really big difference between, going to a laboratory to a lab, maybe our lab, and do an experiment with the robot and find it to be very exciting and, and everything, and yeah, robots are cool. But when it comes to you spending money on buying one of these, that's a whole different story. So the question about if a social robot can ever be successful is a really difficult one. And I guess this brings me to my main slide, which is the fundamental question, and I have no answer to this, and I hope that you actually can enlighten me, is that yes, in the area of AI, we make progress, right? Over the years, we've been able to be chess masters, be Go masters, even play Jeopardy. We can do all of these things, and we put effort into it, and we make progress, right? But the question really is the shape of this curve? That is the question. Because is this a diminishing return thing? Like, yes, we can always improve and make AI a little bit better and a little bit better, but it will never be good enough. Because it can never be. Or will we ever surpass this threshold, and then we have the social robot that is intelligent enough for us to be interesting? And of course, there are many, many different ways around this problem. And it really only occurs, as I said, in long-term interaction. Short-term interaction, you can make it fun. Put a robot there, the kids will play with it for like 15, 20 minutes. Yeah, that works. Give them the robot for a week. Give them a robot for a month. Give them the robot for a year and see how much they play with it. It's going to be a whole different story. So here's a way of how you can get around this problem. I call this fake AI.
Alan Turing proposed a test
even with
of
Alan Turing.
intelligence of machines instead of quickly applying
So
stereotypes.
here you got robots that talk to each other.
Lords of all riches, dwelling in the home of wealth, and
But these robots, their database is filled with the Bible, the Quran, and some other mystical texts. And the point here is that they can talk to each other.
Found alone.
It doesn't have to make sense, right? Because as soon as you abandon logic and you just go for mysticism, all of this sounds terribly smart. But of course, it isn't, it's really cheap trick. But nevertheless, it works. So that's fake AI for you. So we can also, of course, exploit the suspension of belief, and we can also exploit the weaknesses of people that are built to anthropomorphize and to interpret things into robots, and we can exploit that as well. And to be honest, one of the ways that we do this actually all the time is when we apply for funding. We sell all those agencies' dreams of robots. Another way to go about it is what we call Wizard of Oz approach. In this way, what you do is that you have a robot, but you have a human in the background who's controlling the robot. And we in my area do this kind of experiments all the time because, for example, speech recognition doesn't work. If the robot is in a shopping mall, speech recognition is not good enough. So we have a person in the back room with headphones on, listening to what's happening and pressing the buttons accordingly, just like the Wizard of Oz. And you can fake a lot of AI this way. And the people don't notice it and don't recognize it. But of course, this has some ethical implications as well. I mean, of course, we're using deception, but you can possibly justify it. But there are some other problems. Another way around the problem is just to say it's not a bug, it's a feature. So the fact that robots are extremely repetitive, that their abilities are limited, you can just use that for looking for a group that particularly likes these kind of limitations. And then we're talking about special needs people, like, for example, patients with dementia. If their memory is gone and every 5 minutes they meet a new robot, great, right? Or kids with, and it's been shown, kids with autism, for some reason they really, really like robots. And so we turn this bug in terms of how bad robots are into a feature. And so we've got the solution, and now we're trying to find the problem. And one thing is for certain, hopefully my career is pretty safe, because this is going to be endless. We'll never get to the point where we can write a paper where we say they believe this resolves all the many questions, no further research is necessary. It's not going to happen anywhere soon. So yeah, it guarantees me a little bit of job security, I suppose. But what it gets tricky is that I'm a fiction writer in the grand proposal genre. Because what I do is I sell ideas and dreams to our government. And when I sell them dreams about robots, the people who make these decisions, they've got ideas about robots, again, which are mainly informed about science fiction. And the problem really is that at some point, when I tell them these dreams, they might take it seriously. So here we go. Let's see if I can get this to work. I'm sorry. It's always the same trick.
And then I said, supposing you brought the light inside the body, which you can do either through the skin or in some other way. And I think you said you're going to test that too. Sounds interesting. Right, and then I see the disinfectant, where it knocks it out in 1 minute. And is there a way we can do something like that by injection inside or almost a cleaning? Because you see it gets on the lungs and it does a tremendous number of the lungs. So it'd be interesting.
So this is the classical bleach injection idea that Trump had. So if you got somebody who's dumb enough, we'd sell them these dreams, they might actually buy it, and that is potentially dangerous. And as horrible as Trump is, I'm going to miss him for one simple reason. He gave me so much comical material that I can use in my lectures. All these examples of things go wrong. I'm really going to miss him for that. And you might think, okay, wow, that's just Trump. It's the U.S. That's stupid. It could, we're here in New Zealand. That could never happen to us, right? So here we go, our very own AI specialist. Nope. Sorry.
We're going to remove the people from the equation everywhere but customer support and put a machine in charge. So the idea is take the links out where we've got a human involved, replace it with a machine and see what happens. So is it going to be a colossal disaster or a success? We'll find out. We're taking away the management team, we're removing the board, we're taking away the accounts people, product procurement, configuration, provisioning, customer support, social media management, all of it, and we're going to give it to a computer program and see what it does. But beyond that, we're not going to watch it, we're not going to stop it, we're going to let it do what it wants and what it sees to be fit, provided it can present us with a reason for why it's doing it. So if it wants to terminate people's accounts, why is it doing it? If it doesn't want to connect these people, why does it want to do it? All those sorts of things. So there'll be a human oversight, but we're not going to watch it. We make terrible talk for one simple evaluating reason, one to see.
So here we go. This is Zach, the supercomputer that is managing a whole company, which is the CEO of a company doing all of these managerial tasks. And we've got minutes of that company in which Zach, the supercomputer, is participating and offering opinions and leading the company. And people in this company really thought that Zach is the supercomputer that is leading the company. And they then went on to start raising money essentially, right? Because they wanted to further develop this. And one of the things they set up is Omega Health. And Omega Health is supposed to use ZAC, the supercomputer, for note-taking in patient doctors relationships, because it takes a lot of time. The amount of documentation they have to do is crazy. And so yeah, that's in a way is a good idea. Oh, I'm giving away here everything.
So we started off to train Zach and were amazed by his ability. In no time at all, we trained him to take notes in SOAP format. That's subjective, what the patient said; objective, what the doctor found; assessment, what the doctor thought the findings meant; and a plan, which speaks for itself. This is the standard format that most clinical notes follow, even if the doctors don't realise it. And it was pretty amazing stuff right from the start, so we decided we would actually study this to see if it was as good as we thought it was. And the way we did this was we got 5 sets of clinical notes that were created using only ZAC listening in on the consultation. And we got 20 sets of clinical notes, 5 each from 4 different doctors. We told a panel of 15 medical students that we were doing an audit on notes quality, and that we were just checking to make sure that the doctors were being as honest as they should be in terms of a notes audit, and that students were merely checking up on that. And the students assessed each of the clinical consultations in random order against a set of criteria set by the Royal New Zealand College of General Practitioners. We were amazed by the results. We knew Zach was good, but what we didn't realise was that Zach beat all 4 of the doctors with whom he'd been compared. And these weren't, you know...
So here we go. Zach, the supercomputer, takes the recordings of a consultation, perfectly transcribes this, and even gives recommendation and references, right? Why would you not want to throw your money at this? You know, because it's a great thing. As it turns out, and I'll give you a hint, the interaction with Zach was done through email. If you want to interact with Zach, you write him an email. And it might respond immediately, might respond a day later, you know, you never knew. But as it turns out, that essentially this whole thing was just, well, the best way to interpret it is fake it until you make it. Right? So you pretend to have a functionality, try to get as much funding as you can, and then you start trying to build it. That's the most positive explanation. The more negative one is it's just been a scam. They sold us the idea of a future, you know, of an AI that can do all of these things. They make all these promises, and people are vulnerable to this. Right? This medical doctor really thought that he was interacting with an AI. He was perfectly convinced of it. Several people were perfectly fooled into the belief that they're actually interacting with an AI. It was quite something. Anyway, so eventually came, of course, you know, after some complaints were done, essentially in the investigation, it turns out this whole thing didn't pan out. It was just a fake. And so the whole thing was dismantled. The companies went into receivership, and yeah, it all disappeared. On the plus side, not too much money was wasted. So that's a good thing. But that's here, right in Christchurch. So when it comes into the question about why then do we need a robot? We here now for this is the Amazon Echo Show 10. And this is not just a smart speaker, but actually has a screen, and the screen can rotate so it can try to look at you, right? Jibo, right? So how is this same but different? Well, the difference here is that for Jibo, they knew exactly that they would never be able to develop all the functionality to make it fun for long-term interaction, right? Because you need to develop all these games and interactions and functionalities. And they were just a small company. They could never do that. So what you do is you crowdsource it, right? You make a developer platform, and you offer people like the Apple App Store, right? You offer people, 70% of the cut, and they can offer functionalities, and there you go. Now, with Amazon devices, if you create a little program for that, you've got millions of devices already, so you've got a huge customer base, and that works. And there's potentially something in it for developers to invest into building a certain functionality. As for Jibo, well, they only sold a couple of thousands, and that's the maximum you're going to sell, right? So what developer would actually put effort into creating a functionality for such a limited customer base? So if you ask me, well, what's then the whole point? You know, why? I mean, we got smart speakers. Isn't that just good enough? And the answer is maybe that is enough. There's only one thing that would speak against it, and that is touch. I mean, if you go for our pure functionality, probably, I mean, our dishwasher is a robot, our washing machine is a robot. There are already all kind of very specialized robots that we have in our house, and they are functional and they work. So if you, for example, want to have a robot that cooks for you, right, they've got these arms that come down from the ceiling and they can chop things and cook things for you, very dedicated machines, right? But they're not necessarily meant to be a social interface. But there's something about touch that's quite peculiar. And that is, have you ever tried to tickle yourself? It doesn't work. It's fantastic. Our brain doesn't work this way. If I do this, nothing. If you do that, yeah, it's going to tickle, right? So the question then is, we tried this experiment where we had a robot, you know, actually trying to give this kind of head massage, which is extremely tickling. And when we compared it to a person doing it, or, you know, you do it by yourself and you see what kind of difference there is. And there is indeed something to touch. So touching each other is something quite special. And I challenge you, particularly all the people who are holding a mobile phone right now, I argue that you have more physical interaction with your phone than with your partner. No? Well, go into your screen time section and check how many hours you spend today already on your phone. It'll probably be around at least an hour. Did you already spend today an hour touching your partner? Probably not. Okay, so here's another video. Here we got the Pop Hero robot, and we just got it. You know, I took it home. These are my kids, and I just took it out of the box, switched it on, put it in the living room, see what happens. And this is what happens. If I can again not make it work. So my kids decided that the most appropriate way of interacting with this robot was to kiss it. It's not scripted, that's just what it was. It had an LED mouth, right? It wasn't even a physical mouth, it was just an LED mouth. But this is the interaction that came to them. You know, touch it, kiss it, see what happens, right? So there is something about touch that we do not get by a Google Dot like a smart speaker on the table. And we're coming back to this question. What is the shape of this curve? And I don't know the answer. Maybe Richard does. But that's the million-dollar question. And I think it's worthwhile to pause a little bit and think about the shape of this curve. Because if this is like here, like a logarithmic curve that, you know, diminishing returns, like you can throw as much effort at it and it will never work because it can never work, then maybe we should stop and try something else. And not just create another robot that tries the exact same thing that everybody already tried before and failed, right? If you're interested, I'm running this podcast where I interview a lot of interesting people about all of these kind of questions. Have a look at it. We did some books recently, an introduction to ethics, robotics, and AI. There's a book coming up called Robots in Education. This is the German cover. The English cover is not yet ready, but that might actually has become more relevant recently. And with that, I would like to thank you and take your questions.
Thanks, Mr.